6, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.
All right, this is CR 0124316665. Defendant is present in custody with counsel, Ms. Thompson, Ms. Jennings, and Ms. Taylor, Ms. Massoff, and Ms. Barlow. The state's present with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Horowitz, Ms. Jennings, and Mr. Nye. Here as well. Am I miss anybody? I'm sorry.
Ms. Allen is here as well.
Ms. Allen is here as well. Very well, thank you. All right, we are here today to entertain a change of plea. Before I start, I want to address some issues of concern and otherwise. First, I appreciate everybody in attendance today being on their best behavior. Please, no outbursts or demonstrations. Any such conduct will result in immediate removal and may result in an inability to attend further court proceedings in this case. I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases where defendants are entitled to have their cases processed and, frankly, as important, if not more so, for victims to have their cases processed in those cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will, make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me. Period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this because, again, it is not appropriate and, frankly, not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this. I also want people to understand some very basic concepts about the ideas of separation of powers, and what the court's duties are, and what the duties and the rights of the executive, or in this case, the prosecuting attorney, is. The executive, the elected prosecutor, is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, including whether, as well as what penalties to ask for, and what penalties to pursue, including the death penalty. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance. If I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea. Finally, I want to offer my apologies to all the families, including the victims' families, the families of the defendant, for the short notice for today's hearing, and I'm sure what must have been the hurried efforts to get here. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand. Prior to that time, I was under the belief that this case was proceeding to trial, as had been indicated, and my staff and I were busy continuing to work on preparations to have potentially 10,000 citizens of Ada County come to jury duty starting in mid-July, with the questionnaire process in mid-July. It was, once I learned of the defendant's decision to change his plea in this case, it was important that I take the plea as soon as possible because of the extraordinary administrative efforts that were otherwise attendant to the process of this, getting this trial potentially underway on time, and including the significant process of bringing, again, potentially up to 10,000 jurors to come in and fill out juror questionnaires prior to the beginning of the voir dire process. And so it was important that we, if we're going to go down this road, do so expeditiously so that we can avoid those costs and expenses associated with that. Otherwise, if it was not going to result in a plea, or if for some reason the plea were to fall through today, that we could continue diligently towards trial at the time specified. And so that obviously required that we act quickly. And so some folks may have not had the amount of time that we would otherwise allow for them to travel here. And so, again, I apologize for that. I want to make people aware that during the hearing, if you are to leave the courtroom for any reason, you will not be readmitted during the hearing. Also, when we finish the hearing this morning, I ask that the public and media wait in their seats until the victims' families and the defendants' families and others are escorted out of the courtroom before you start to leave. Finally, I want to acknowledge the trial court administrator and her staff, the Ada County Sheriff, and the Ada County 4th District Marshal Service for the huge lift that they've accomplished in preparing for and orchestrating this hearing today, as well as to all the security attendant today that you see, and some of whom many of whom you don't see, with less than 48 hours notice. And so I appreciate the hard work that they've been doing. Frankly, some of them while they were on some vacation prior to the trial starting and had to call that short. And so I appreciate very much their professionalism and dedication. All right. That said, let's move to the business of today. I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates in sum the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment: burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing, to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35. This is not a Rule 11 agreement, meaning the court is not bound by the plea agreement and could impose a different lawful sentence at sentencing. The stipulated agreement between the parties is the maximum on each count. So theoretically, the only thing the court could do would be a lesser sentence at sentencing. But the defendant is not free to ask the court to do so under the plea agreement. Are there any other material terms of the plea agreement that the parties would like to make? Obviously, the plea agreement, the written plea agreement will speak for itself and be part of the court record.
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very well. All right. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this case and all of its ramifications with your client?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you discussed fully with him his rights, defenses, and possible consequences to him of the guilty plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you been able to do all the discovery you feel necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you informed your client of the importance of providing the court truthful and accurate answers in taking this plea today?
I have.
Have you apprised your client of any and all offers and counter offers and answered his questions about those?
Yes,
Do you consent to the entry of the plea today?
I do.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that you so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now, while you're standing, actually, why don't you take the oath from the clerk?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter not being before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Kohberg, just to make it easier, you don't need to stand when you speak to me. I appreciate the sign of respect, but for convenience, you can remain seated, all right? Before I start asking you questions today, have you consumed substantive questions? Let me ask you, have you consumed any alcohol, drug, or other intoxicating substance that would impair your ability to understand or exercise reasonable judgment?
No.
You feel like you are thinking clearly today?
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. They include on count 1, the burglary, a fine of up to $50,000 and a period of incarceration of up to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime. Count 2, 3, 4, and 5 for first-degree murder. The consequences include a fine of up to $50,000, a period of incarceration of life imprisonment, which is a requirement of a sentence, that it be a life sentence with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years on each of those counts. In addition, you would be potentially responsible for a fine of up to $5,000 to each of the victims of your crime to be enforced in the form of a civil judgment to operate as additional punishment. This is in excess of any restitution or fines that the court could order. And again, you may be required to pay restitution to the victims of the crime. You would be required to provide, as to counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression, and potentially pay for analysis of those samples. You would lose any right to possess, purchase, or carry a firearm, the right to serve on jury duty, the right to hold public office, and the right to vote. Do you understand the charges and all those possible consequences?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Has anyone, other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And counsel, obviously there have been a number of motions filed to suppress evidence in this case. Other than those filed, are there any other motions that you felt were available with respect to Rule 12?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case should you not plead guilty. Did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the state would have had to have proven at trial, had you, to the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, had you, if you didn't plead guilty, let me find the document, hang on a second here. All right. So as to count one burglary, the state would have to have proven that on or about November 13, 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence located at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. As to count two, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogan, from which she died. As to count three, the state would have had to have proven that on that same date in Latah County, at that same address, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. As to count four, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count five, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state. He purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include at trial video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway just across the state line from Moscow that would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important To note, single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the 3rd floor, it was on the 2nd floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen to where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th, 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence would show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court, and the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, in those compartments in the doors. Even we try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence of 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly, based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon, the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor, the state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed, given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than one full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. Obviously, we have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in one day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties or the next week, the week of August 4 is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. We'll start at 9 in the morning. Does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing. So we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
We'd have no objection for the order to remain in place through sentencing.
All right. I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn in order to give the parties the space and time to prepare to meet what I'm sure will be the deluge of media requests. That's at least my preliminary decision at this point. We can always revisit if it seems to be, for some reason, I should. that said. Obviously, I don't think the defendant, a bond was ever set for the defendant. Were it, it would be revoked. The prior order allowing him to come in civilian clothes is revoked, given his plea and no longer the presumption of innocence. And in fact, now the actual conviction for the crimes. He will continue to be held at the jail pending sentencing. Is there anything else today?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
I assume that the trial date will be vacated
trial
and those
is-
4 jurors will be released.
The trial will be vacated, and I'm sure that the jury commissioner will get word to those that receive their summons that they won't be required to attend. So
Thank you, Your Honor.
that said, again, if you would all please wait for the parties and the victims' families and others to leave the courtroom before you do, I would appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned. All right, please.
Okay, well, there you have it. That's I think it was a longer hearing than I expected. It was definitely a longer hearing than I expected. I feel like the judge did a good job though of his legal obligation to make sure that none of this was contrived or, you know, improperly brought. But that's pretty much what we expected. I know a lot of people were really hoping for some kind of allocution from Kohberger. I don't believe we're going to see that. Pretty much what you heard today, that's what you're going to hear until the entire case is unsealed, and it will be at some point. But this is probably all we're going to know for a good long time. The prosecutor, when he read his statement, or made his statement, essentially said there would be some things here that were a little different than what the public had understood. Was there? The only thing that I heard, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, chatters, but the only thing that I heard that I had not heard before was that he had a container in his hand when the witness saw him in the hall. What the hell is that? I have no idea what that was about. None. But maybe we'll learn more about that later. We probably won't. Talking about the knife, some of you in the chat suggested that maybe that got thrown into a body of water. I think you're probably right about that. There's quite a bit of water around there, and it wouldn't that would make sense to me that that's where it went. As always, the conversation about him coming back to the crime scene. And for a long time, I thought he was maybe coming back to see what was up, what was going on. Were the authorities there? Was the crime scene unit there? Were they gathering evidence? Had they been found? I think it took the family, or it took them longer to find these bodies than he thought. Or was he going back for the knife sheath when he realized he didn't have it? I feel like both are possible. Yep. Right, like maybe like an arsonist who returns to watch. And if you can hear Nellie howling, I apologize. Her dad had the nerve to go somewhere without her, so she's watching out the front window, crying her eyes out. Life with a basset hound. At any rate, so I've always wondered about that. Like, what did that actually, why did he come back? I don't think we'd ever heard before, too, that he tried to delete his Amazon history. I wasn't familiar with that either. I still, maybe so, Irene, maybe it was for a trophy. Yeah. I also wonder, well, I've thought for a long time that Bryan was a budding serial killer and that he wanted to use his education and his sense of superiority to outsmart the police, to be able to commit the perfect crimes. I even wonder if he wanted to be the kind of serial killer that committed the crimes and then investigated them. You know, I still think that was somewhere along the lines of his thinking. I think that we'd all like to hear a motive, but let's be real. You never really hear a motive. You hear the supposed motive from the prosecution, from the narrative that they are able to put together from what they learn. We have a lot of times a motive that we expect, like in the case of Lori Vallow and her desire to keep collecting all of the life insurance money she could. I don't think we're ever really going to get a motive from Kohberger, but I think we can make some pretty good assumptions about who he was as a person and maybe what his thought process was like. Definitely a psychopath. I agree with that completely. Some of you are asking about the guilty plea advisory form. Of course, we don't have his. That won't be on the record until after this case is unsealed. But I can tell you what the guilty plea advisory form looks like. I'm going to share a screen here. So this is the guilty plea advisory form from Idaho Supreme Court.gov. So the guilty plea advisory form, the defendant fills out their name, age, date of birth, case number, yada yada. Then there's a long list of constitutional rights that they have to go through and initial each of those things. Then there are questions regarding to ability to enter plea, basically assessing if they are capable of understanding the plea. Questions like, do you read and write the English language? What is your true and legal name? What is the highest grade of school you completed? Are you currently under the care of a mental health professional? Have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health disorder? Are you currently prescribed any medication? In the last 48 hours, have you taken any medication, drugs, or have you consumed any alcoholic beverages which you believe would affect your ability to understand these questions? Are you under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or other medication at this time? Are you capable of understanding these proceedings? Do you claim that you are mentally incapable of understanding these proceedings or what it means to plead guilty to a crime? Is there anything going on in your life that affects your ability to enter a voluntary guilty plea? Are you having any difficulty in understanding what you are doing by filling out this form? Is there any other reason that you cannot make a reasoned and well-informed decision of this case? With a spot to fill that in if there's comments you want to make there. Then on the plea agreement itself, is your guilty plea the result of a plea agreement? And then, of course, what are the terms of that plea agreement? If a written plea agreement was done, have you read this plea agreement? Do you understand the plea agreement? And then discussing what type of plea agreement. There's a non-binding agreement, which means the court is not bound to the agreement by any sentencing recommendations. Or there's a binding agreement, which means that the district court does not impose the specific sentence as recommended by both parties, and that I will be allowed to withdraw my plea deal and proceed to a jury trial if wanted. I believe his was a non-binding plea deal. Then the questions about if you were coerced. Oh my goodness. Can you guys hear her? This is crazy. Has anyone told you what your sentence will be? Is this a conditional guilty plea? Have you waived your right to your judgment of conviction as a part of your plea agreement? Have you waived your right to appeal your sentence as a part of your plea agreement? And then they go on to talk about potential sentence, consequences of a guilty plea, questions about your relationship with your attorney, questions about if your guilty plea is the result of a plea agreement reached through mediation, and then the actual entry of the plea. And that's it. So there's 63 total questions on the form. And then, of course, it has to be dated and signed. And then there's a whole other section about post-plea rights as well. So it's a pretty good sized form, and that has to be, you know, fully filled out and fully made clear. So that's what it is. So it'll be interesting to see his, however, we basically heard it today because what the judge went through with him essentially is what that form looks like. But will he speak on his own behalf at the sentencing? He probably could. I seriously doubt that he will. With the sentencing, I was always disappointed for the families at Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell's sentencings that more people that wanted to chime in weren't given that opportunity. I don't know what this is going to look like. We do know that in Idaho, you are not allowed to address the defendant. You can only address the court. I don't know if they are going to limit them like they did in Lori and Chad's. I hope not. I hope that the prosecutor really fights to let any members of those families speak that want to. They should have that right. Honestly, I don't like the way sentencing in Idaho is done. I think it's way too sensitive to the defendant, and the families should have the right to say what they want to, and the families should have the right to address the defendant. It's the only chance they get. Yep. I am very, very grateful that as a part of this agreement that he cannot have any appeals. I know that some of you are angry and upset because you wanted the death penalty. I know that some of you feel like the guilty plea is a great way to go. I'm not here to debate that. There's definitely an argument on both sides of it. I know that some of the victims' families are very angry and upset, and that some of them feel like this is the way to go. I will tell you that for the victims' families, and they have every right to feel any way that they feel. Long term, they will not have to be constantly alerted of another filing, of another appeal, of another issue, of another challenge. They won't have to be dragged back into court for parole hearings or potential ones. They won't ever have to be in fear that there could be a possible appeal for whatever reason. They won't ever have to face the potentials of the death penalty where stays are granted for whatever reason and there's opportunities that are granted for more time over and over and over again. Luca, I apologize, you guys. My dogs are horrible today. Okay, I'm going to let him out. Sorry, good Lord. They're driving me crazy. First they were mad because their dad wasn't home. Now they're mad because he is home and he didn't come in the house. But anyway, they don't have attachment disorders. No. Anyway, and again, the families have every right to feel however they feel. For me, I feel grateful for them because they are not going to have to go through so much pain and drama forever with him. They won't ever have to get a call that today's the, that we finally have a execution date, to only have that execution date ripped back for whatever reason. They won't ever have to worry that an appeal could be successful for some kind of clerical issue or problem like that. Those aren't things they're ever going to have to deal with. And I'm so glad for them that they won't. But right now, they're angry. They're hurt. They've lost something precious. This all sucks. And they have the right to be angry. It does all suck. There's nothing good about this. There's no good thing. I mean, they did get a guilty verdict. Do I think they would have gotten a guilty verdict had they gone to trial? I do. But juries can be funny. And things can happen. Hung juries happen. Mistrials happen because of errors or issues or something misspoken by somebody or a juror having a problem or, so many things could happen that aren't going to happen now. So here we are. Again, I know there's lots of different thoughts and feels on this, but that's where we are. I'll be honest, I'm relieved. Personally, I'm relieved. I'm relieved for the potential jurors who are going to have to live through the horror of this trial. I
too.
am, yeah. And hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I am super grateful that the court staff don't have to go through a 3-month trial.
Yeah.
And yes, can you imagine if you got an acquittal, how people would feel?
Right. Now there's no risk of him getting out at any time.
Yep.
And to not have to go through appeals,
Mm.
having watched other families have to do that, like, it's incredible. The reality that when he heads for prison, it's over.
Yep.
They never
Forever.
have to deal with anything related to him again.
Yep.
And in the long run, that is a huge blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you, Red. He will never, ever, ever get to do this to anyone ever again.
Right. And, I mean, I understand families being angry, but when they start encouraging people to call the judge and call the court and meddle,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that can take down a trial.
Very problematic.
Yeah.
They had to, the judge had to make that statement today. I hope you guys understand that. He had to make that statement today to be sure that it's clear that he is following the basis of the law only, which is his job.
Right.
And that public opinion has nothing to do with his job and following the law.
Well, and he needed to publicly acknowledge that those things had happened, because if he didn't, it could be seen as him hiding something, him colluding.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want any of those things. What we want are clean convictions.
Yeah.
That's when the legal system is working at its very best.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the guilty plea here it's the best case scenario.
It is the justice system doing what the justice system does.
It is.
And I know some people are asking, why would the state allow for a plea deal if their case was solid and they figured they could get a conviction? For a lot of reasons. But I'll tell you honestly, a lot of it, and you're not going to like this, is about money.
It is. It is about money. Yeah.
Because the cost of these trials is astronomical. And
I mean, the day bills cost Idaho millions and millions and millions of dollars to convict.
Mm-hmm.
This would have to, it's already cost a ton of money. And then to put on the trial too.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, even if he got the death penalty, they're not going to, he wouldn't even come up with an execution date for 20 to 30 years from now.
Yeah.
It really makes very little difference in the long run.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yep. Absolutely. Right. A lot of people thought OJ and Casey Anthony were solid cases, and yet they got acquittals. I don't know that. I really don't think that they would have gotten acquittals in this case, but there's always the risk. There's always
but
the
you
risk.
don't, a guarantee. A plea deal like this is the
Is the only guarantee.
only guarantee.
For sure. Yep. Yeah, Lori was lying about that million for a Daybell expert. That wasn't
Oh,
true.
she just makes shit up, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there were experts, and she is probably talking about that that psychologist that we never actually got to hear from. He was likely the most expensive expert
Oh, yeah.
witness they had.
Had to have been Dr. Werner, for sure.
Which I wish we could see what his report said.
We desperately wanted to hear Dr. Werner's take on that. Maybe he'll write a book on
Yeah.
it. Dr. Werner, if you're listening, and I know you're not, please write a book about Lori Vallow. Please.
Right. Come on, man.
Please.
Come on.
Or we don't have $1 million, but you could always come on this show and we'll talk about it together.
Yeah. I wish, because I would be so fascinated to hear what he thinks of this situation, because he could probably, based on all of the information that's out there, give a pretty good assessment of Chad as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would be fascinating to hear what he had to say.
Absolutely. I wanted to make a point. Retriever Mon said, I'm glad the 2 girls that survived can now move forward in their recovery. Super good
Right.
point. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
They don't have to testify. They don't have to be exposed to all of this again. Like,
Mm-hmm. And the public scrutiny. I'll tell you guys, though, the people watching over on Twitter the last couple of days has been something else. Because there was a kind of surprising contingency of people that were convinced that Kohberger was innocent and that this was just all a big conspiracy theory. And boy, have they taken this news hard. Like,
right?
oh,
Hello, delusional much.
I,
Like, what?
they really failed to read the original arrest affidavit because that was really damning. But holy moly, watching reading posts, it's pretty shocking and baffling to see these folks that
Well,
I
the
saw
Reddit,
one woman.
the Reddit group that is
Yeah.
a free Bryan Kohberger.
Mhm.
Holy, I'm not a member because you got to be careful. You
Mhm.
can't be very covert in there because they vet you. They wouldn't like me. And if you comment anything at all, they will destroy you. It was wild stuff. But they're probably the ones, that are going to write to him and try to marry him while he's in prison.
Oh, definitely. Definitely them. I saw one woman that was just absolutely doing digital sobbing on Twitter saying, I'm done with true crime. I've spent the last 2.5 years defending Bryan Kohberger, believing he was innocent, and now he just goes and does this?
What a betrayal on your personal relationship with this psychopathic murderer.
Oh
What?
my goodness.
Lady.
You should be done with true crime real
You
quick.
probably should. Yeah.
Yep. Super fast. But anyway, yeah, so what a day.
Wow. Just feels very solemn.
Yeah, yeah.
It was interesting to actually hear his voice for the first time.
Not what I expected. I think
No.
I expected a deeper, darker voice than that.
I did too. Mm-hmm.
He sounded like a kid. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Diddy also, jury came back today, found him guilty on 2 of the lesser charges of prostitution, transporting prostitutes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So sentencing hearing, or bail hearing, I think, not sentencing, bail hearing for him this afternoon, I think at 5, which would be 3 o'clock our time. I mean, we haven't really extensively covered the Diddy trial. I didn't want to. I'm glad we haven't. There's a lot more true crime that deserved our attention a lot more. But just FYI, that did happen and is happening today.
But my God, if they give him bail, that will be the stupidest thing that the courts have ever done.
Mm-hmm.
He has literally unlimited resources. He'll disappear.
I'll expect it. I'll bet you $1 billion that happens today. Yeah. Any comments about BK's parents? I know they were there, or at least some of his family was there. They say they were very stone-faced. I can't imagine how they're feeling either. I mean, this is just such a horrific situation for everyone, that's involved in any way. And I can't imagine how much this has torn their family asunder as well. I Can't even imagine.
No. It so hideous for them,
Hmm.
you know, and they've tried to stand by him because he's their family.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me that they don't know.
Yeah.
They raised that kid. Those sisters grew up with him.
They had
I mean, one of the
they knew he
sisters
was
literally
creepy.
wondered if he was involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they knew.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. But I'm sure it's still been incredibly hard on their family.
Oh yeah.
But I agree with that. They're, yeah, pretty wild. Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I have a brother-in-law that passed about a year and a half ago that was in a lot of trouble here in our area for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I saw something in the news, especially a robbery or an assault, I would always be looking at, especially when they were like, look at this picture and see if you know this person. Every time I was looking at it to see if it was him because I
Yeah.
figured it sure could be. Um, I kind of understand that sentiment, not to the degree of what happened in her family, but I understand that sentiment to some degree because, yep, I've always watched for Todd to see if he was the one, the perp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
Just feels surreal after
Yes, and
this
people have been
Kohberger
very
case has
mean
gone
to
on
the
forever.
Kohbergers. And we see this a lot when somebody commits a horrible crime. People turn on their families, send them death threats. They get fired from their jobs. They have a hard time finding work. Is that
It's
fair?
ridiculous.
I don't know. We've been pretty
How
mean to Lori's family, but
for reasons though.
yeah,
Actual reasons. Like
like defending
the
her. Yeah,
Kohbergers were across the country
right.
from this crime. Like
Yeah,
they weren't anywhere near. They didn't assist in any way. They, like
yeah. They knew they had a weird, muffed up kid, but it's not
right.
like they were involved in these crimes. Yeah,
No.
yeah. And, for all the victims' families, they have very split opinions right now. They're lashing out. They're angry. They're frustrated. They have the right to feel the way they feel.
They do. They
None of
definitely
us
do.
have ever stood in their shoes. We don't know how that would feel, and hopefully none of us ever do, you know?
No. I mean, honestly, I'm proud of the state of Idaho.
Hmm.
It's not like a crime like that had occurred before in Moscow, Idaho.
Hmm.
These are small municipalities. We've said the same thing about the Daybell Vallow murders. Like,
Yeah.
they did a really good job with what they had and with the
Yes.
experience that they had. And they allowed a lot of help and they caught him quickly and they got it guilty. They
Yeah.
got it guilty. Like, I will never, ever agree with the statement that Idaho failed these victims. No,
No.
it didn't.
Yesterday, Brian Enton tweeted that he just feels like the state of Idaho just didn't want to deal with this. And I responded because I was like, what are you talking about? The
Right.
state of
Idaho
Idaho
has been dealing with this all along.
got a quick arrest that was correct, had a ton of evidence together in the initial arrest affidavit. They've been going through the process now for all this time, and they got a guilty. What do you mean they didn't want to deal with this? But on the other side of that, Brian, no state wants to deal with this. No state
No.
wants to have 4 college students stabbed to death in their town or in their
No.
state. Yeah, nobody wants to deal with it, but Idaho did deal with it. One of his examples was Judge passing the case off. He was retiring.
Right. He was retiring and they were moving the trial many hours away
Yeah,
from where he presided.
yeah,
Like, I'm not surprised at all. It was a huge sacrifice on the part of Judge Boyce.
Judge. Oh, Boyce, yeah.
Judge Boyce to
huge,
stay
yeah.
on the Daybell Vallow trials
Mm-hmm.
after they moved him to 5 hours away.
Yeah, yeah, without a deal.
It's a huge deal. And
Yeah,
I just don't think that it mattered which judge it was going to be. The judge does not determine the outcome of the case.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I really bristled at that statement. I think it's really unfair. One of his examples
I
was
do
the way
too.
they gagged the case. Here's the thing. Small town Idaho does not like people meddling in their business. And I know
Right.
lots of small towns probably feel the same way. But small town Moscow, Idaho was immediately inundated with people from all over the country. Press, looky-loos, podcasters, slamming into their town, grabbing everything they could find, just devouring Moscow over this murder.
Right.
They were protecting a few things themselves, law enforcement, the evidence itself, and the witnesses, and the jury.
Yeah.
It's a small town.
And they'd
But,
never dealt with anything like this before.
right. Now,
And it was
the
leaking like a
press,
fucking sieve.
right. I mean, we had members of law enforcement getting on the news saying things that they absolutely should have never said and things like that.
Yeah. Or the mayor
The press is
or
always
the
going to be
president of the
mad.
university.
Yes, all of them. The press is always going to be mad when a case is sealed. But, when it's gagged. They're always going to be mad because they're blocked from
And
information they want to have. We don't like it
it
either.
is, it's frustrating. Yeah.
It is. But I really understand why they did that on a lot of different levels. But the one level that I see that I think maybe Bryan doesn't understand is the circling of the wagons, not to protect Kohberger, but to protect their town. Because
Right.
they did bristle at the huge amount of media attention that came immediately into Moscow.
And the law enforcement and the judicial system there had not had an experience like that
Ever.
ever
Yeah,
before.
ever. Yeah,
Yeah. It is exactly like what happened here
it
with
is.
Dave Alvalo. Like,
It is, except for we didn't seal. We didn't gag, which I thought was
no.
amazing. Yeah,
Well, I don't know. They didn't gag, but Boyce
they
did
sealed a lot.
seal a ton of stuff.
That's a good
So
point. Yeah.
there were similar actions here too, but man, you're dealing with everybody has in the whole situation has never dealt with a crime that heinous, that big, that many victims, you
Yeah,
know.
for sure. Yeah. But I think it's also easy to pick on podunk small town Idaho, and that's okay. Whatever. We don't actually care. Except for that I do think it's unfair to say that Idaho just never wanted this case. I mean, A, of course they didn't. Who the hell does?
Who would want it?
And B, they got a quick uh, arrest, a quick correct arrest, and they've gotten a guilty plea. I just don't know what else you want. I really
Yeah,
don't.
like Idaho solved this crime. So what the hell? Yeah, it's kind of gross. And also Brian Enton is from Florida.
Right.
So what the hell, dude? Come on, we appreciated you in the Gabby Petito case, but don't pretend like you understand Idaho. You don't.
No.
You are from as far across the United States as you can get from us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel about like that, like I did when Nancy Grace came to town, taking big smiling selfies of herself and her friends in front of the house, calling it the Idaho murder house.
So gross. What the hell?
And you guys, you probably noticed, and we've talked about it before, but we covered this case heavily when it started. We were one of the first podcasts to even read out the full arrest affidavit. Maybe we were the first one. Like we were on this really early. We covered it well. And then we took a big step back. And some of you asked us, this is your state. Like, why aren't you guys all over this case? Because everybody is, and they're being super fucking gross about it. And we don't like
Yeah.
it. And
Well,
we
so much
stepped back for
misinformation.
a
We're
while.
just like,
Yeah.
we don't play that.
Mm-mm.
So much misinformation.
Well, and the internet was just so wild, and people were attacking each other right and left over it, and it was just ugly.
Yeah.
And we just went, nah. But then, of course, we finally started dipping our toe back in. But it's why we took a step back for a while, because I felt like this case brought out the worst of true crime. And I didn't like it.
really
And I don't
did.
want to be associated with that.
No, not at all.
I'm not saying we're perfect. I am sure we make mistakes too. I know we do. But there's,
We
I
certainly
don't,
work not to.
yeah, I don't want to be a part of the crowd that harasses families and victims. I don't want to
No,
be a part of the
never, ever.
crowd that throws wild theories out there and things that aren't fact and creates more of the firestorm.
Yeah.
I don't. So, anyway, that's kind of my thought process. One thing I failed to say, though, is that they did discuss the the gag order, or the non-dissemination order is what the judge called it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have opted to keep that until sentencing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people expected, from what I've been reading, that that would have been dropped today. But the prosecution felt like until this is all wrapped up with a bow, let's just keep it, just 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 to be sure, right? Just for all
Yeah.
the reasons.
Then,
And the judge agreed,
wanting
and Taylor
this to
agreed.
be sure that this case works out exactly as is intended here.
Yeah, let's not toe out a line right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I've got. Are you all set?
I'm all set. I'm just, wow.
Yep.
Just wow.
Yeah. What a week. What a week. So sentencing is going to be on July 23rd at 9 a.m.
23rd.
tentatively. They said that could change as, at court availability, but it sounded like they'll do everything they can to stick with that because the families, of course, need to know. And the judge pointed out that they had to give the families got a very short window of time to be able to make it here for this hearing.
Yeah.
And the judge, did apologize for that. He said he basically found out about this about the same time the families did, and essentially said, because all the administrative things are happening to prepare for trial, most especially getting the jurors gathered up, we needed to have this hearing as soon as possible so that we can halt that process. So he said
Yeah.
he, apologized for the short notice. But I gotta say, I can't imagine that most of the families, like they would have gotten on a plane and gotten here as fast as they could, no matter what.
Right.
Like I'm
I thought
sure.
it was very interesting that he said that there were no other trials in the courthouse that entire week.
Yeah.
That he'd shut down all trials in the courthouse except for this,
Yes.
for their jury selection. That was wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm guessing it's because they know what kind of circus it's going to be at the courthouse that week, or would have
Yeah.
been. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's James Craig? Yeah. Earlier, my 2 cents asked what other trials are coming up. So I had listed Stephen Stearns. We are not streaming that one, but we'll keep an eye on it. Of course, Donna Adelson, we will be streaming, and James Craig, we're planning on streaming so long as we can. And so Bethy's asking, who is James Craig? James Craig is the dentist, the Mormon dentist. He's a part of our Mormon Misdeeds series. He's the dentist from Colorado that poisoned his wife, allegedly, in the protein drinks.
Yeah.
He's also
He
the
is a
one who
monster.
earlier this year caught some more charges because he was trying to get inmates to help him to attack the prosecutor and also to hire hot women to come and testify on his behalf.
Yes. Only the
James.
hot can
Only the
testify
hot.
for James,
Mhm.
who is, by the way, not hot.
No. He's
So.
a potato like Chad in most ways, yes.
Yes, he definitely is.
He's also the guy that bought his poison through his business. Used his title as dentist to be able to buy poisons that he ordered through his business on a business
Yes.
laptop and all that jazz. So, yeah. And then Shanna Gardner, too, I believe is supposed to still be this fall as well, as far as I know. And then, of course, Corey Richens in the spring. So
Yeah.
there's quite a few cases that we're following.
They're
Also,
coming.
Nick Alaverdian, but Nick's, I'm not sure how much of that we're going to be able to stream. I know there's parts of like witness statements and things like that will not stream because of the nature of it, because these are sexual assault charges. So I'm not sure on Alaverdian. If we can stream it, we absolutely will, but I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll keep an eye. Either way, if we
Yeah.
can't stream it, we'll still be reporting on whatever the hell is going to go on with Shamalama Ding Dong.
Yeah, so we're keeping an eye on it. He's not even due back in, I looked at him today. He's not even due back in court until August. But I think I don't know. I got to do a little research. I'll tell you tonight on case updates what's going on there. Right? No uggos allowed, Melissa, right? Yeah. They got to be good liars for James, and they got to be pretty. Hot,
Yeah.
even. Yes. And
Well,
apparently
you murdered
dumb
your
as
wife,
hell
dude,
in order
so-
to be willing to do something like that.
Yeah. God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Will Huerman plea? You know, my first instinct is yes, but who
I don't
knows?
know. He is one arrogant motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. But I would have told you last week I didn't think that Kohberger would plea, and now I feel like maybe Huerman will. So who knows? I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall right now.
Who knows? It could be years before they even try Huerman.
Yeah.
It's such a long ways out before we'll see any real resolution in him
Mm-hmm.
because they're still investigating.
Mm-hmm.
His body count's at 7 and it's going to go up, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. They've got a lot of evidence. My God.
They do. Oh yeah, they have him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
without
they've
a doubt.
also got him for however much time they need to have him, frankly.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So we're going to be back tonight at 6 p.m. for case updates, and hopefully I'll get some actual data together so I can tell you what dates the next trials are coming up, so we can actually get them on a calendar. That would be good.
We're also
And-
waiting on Wagner.
Yes.
And so last I've checked, there still is no trial date set. So
Yeah. That's yet another mess. Man, I wish he would plead. Of all the people in the world that need to take a deal, it is him, and get the hell out of here.
right? He's such a dick.
Mhm.
God.
Just torturing that community some more.
Yeah.
Gross. Yep. Alrighty. Well, we'll be back at 6 p.m. Thanks for joining us. What a day. This has been yet another production of the True Crime Squad.
Bye, everybody.
Season 6, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.